Here is what your parents didn't know. Here's the hard truth. Many of your parents did the very best that they could, but today's parents were not taught to build wealth in today's climate. And what's likely is that they taught you what they knew. But that doesn't mean that it's best for what you need now. And here is where some of the old lessons fall short.
You're listening to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard.
Hello and welcome to Property Investor Tales, stories from the front yard, where we share real stories, insights and strategies from property investors around Australia. My name is Emily and I'm one of the advisors here at Positive Real Estate, where we help people build wealth through property. And with over 10,000 clients across Australia and New Zealand, we've seen firsthand just how much property can transform lives. But today's episode is a little bit different. We're not joined by a guest. Instead, I want to take you on a journey about why what your parents told you about money is wrong. Yes, it's wrong. And we'll explore what preconceived ideas about money and creating wealth means for new generations, and what it means for the property market, your family, and why new investors need to unlearn what they were taught about money and reimagine wealth creation in a modern world. So today's episode is targeted at our younger listeners. So if you're in your early 20s or just starting out, this is for you. But if you're a regular and you want to listen in anyway, please do. This episode may just be worth sharing with a young person in your life. So let's dive in. Growing up, your parents probably told you something like, save your money, avoid debt, work hard, and buy a house. Does it sound familiar? The reason I'm telling you this is because this advice no longer applies the way that it once did. So let's step back in time. The world's boomers, Gen X, and even older millennials grew up differently, and not just economically, but emotionally. Money felt more tangible, and debt was taboo. Home ownership was always the end game, and now for young people, that old playbook just isn't working. And I'm going to break that down for you without falling into some type of political debate about who had it worse. So first of all, boomers, they bought homes when land was cheap and jobs were stable and interest rates were high. They were very high, but so were the savings incentives. And then Gen X, they saw property prices soar, but they also lived through recessions, stock market crashes, and rising divorce rates. So they're often really cautious. And then there's millennials. Most of them saddled with student debt, rising living costs, and a volatile job market. And they're often told the solution is to just save more, while watching home ownership drift farther and farther away. Now, dear listeners, meet Generation Alpha and the late Gen Zs. Yes, these are today's 18 and 21-year-olds. They are entering adulthood in a market where home ownership feels less like a milestone and more like a myth. So consider some of these recent headlines. Young Australians feel locked out as housing affordability hits a record low. And the result? Well, it's disillusionment, it's frustration, and a deep need for a new roadmap. So what do you do? What do you do, listeners? Did you speak to your parents? Here is what your parents didn't know. Here's the hard truth. Many of your parents did the very best that they could, but today's parents were not taught to build wealth in today's climate. And what's likely is that they taught you what they knew. But that doesn't mean that it's best for what you need now. And here is where some of the old lessons fall short. Debt isn't evil. It's not bad. A mortgage, for example, on an appreciating asset, that's leverage and that's strategy. But a car loan, that's bad debt. And then there's this. This is what I was told. Save, 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 save. I still remember my first piggy bank, and I still remember the pain of having one of my siblings steal my piggy bank, and I won't name names, but what we know is that inflation will eat your savings away, whereas something like investing starts to build freedom because your money needs to work harder than you do. So while your parents may have valued stability, the world now rewards adaptability and smart risk-taking. And then finally, there's money trauma and money shame. So if your parents struggled, it's easy to absorb their fear and their shame and their silence around finances. But here's the deal. You have the chance to write a new story, one that reflects who you want to be, not some predestined future that you're unable to escape from. But sadly, many young people I speak to don't see their parents as role models for wealth. So they turn to TikTok, they turn to YouTube, and they turn to Reddit. And if that's you, you're not alone. But here's the catch. While the internet has democratized knowledge, it's also flooded with noise. Anyone with a keyboard, anyone with a TikTok account, anyone with a podcast microphone, and that's me included, can give their opinion. And it's never been easier to access information, and it's never been harder to know who to trust. So if you've ever felt lost in a sea of opinions, then you're not alone. But can I take a guess at an app that might be on your phone right now? One of the most seductive options right now for young people is gamified investing. So apps like Robinhood and crypto platforms, they give you a hit with every single trade. So they've got push notifications, they've got leaderboards, badges that you can earn. It's kind of like finance meets Fortnite. But here's the danger. Stock holding periods have dropped to less than a year. What does that tell us? It tells us that people are speculating. People are buying stock and selling it literally the next day. So let's take crypto, for example, often held for just weeks, with long-term crypto considering to be held for just 1 year, right? This is compared to hold periods that averaged over 8 years in the 60s. And my God, does that feel like a world away? Yet it does show us that the landscape is changing. And it's addictive. It's the thrill of trading that ends up replacing the discipline of wealth building. And what that means for you is simple. In a market where you need to build wealth in an ever-changing environment, do you want to be entertained or do you want to be empowered? And I'll take a moment to speak about social media's role in all of this, folks. Has anyone ever seen the hashtag old money, hashtag new money trends getting around? Because I certainly have. So there's the quiet, distinguished luxury of old money, and then there's the hype and the hustle of new money. There's even a way to dress like you come from generational wealth. Hashtag old money. But what is that doing to young Australians? It's fueling comparison, it's fueling confusion, and would you believe it, it's fueling a class divide. It teaches us to chase the look of wealth instead of learning how to build it. It's chasing the hype, it's chasing the trade, rather than the discipline or the quiet strategy that plays out in the background. Real wealth isn't in the outfit. It's in the mindset. So if your parents didn't show you how to build it and social media is making you feel like you never will, then know this. You get to choose your role models. And if you're willing to challenge the way that things have always been done, even in your own family, you're already breaking the cycle. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story about this for me. I opened my first bank account with Dolomites. Does anyone remember the Dolomites program? Who remembers the Dolomites program? It was a cartoon branded deposit slip where you could save coins every week and they would be deposited into your Dolomites bank account. Now, On another limb, it's actually now been disbanded, but that's a story for another time. So the bank at the time, the Commonwealth Bank, I opened that Dolomites program, and that bank account stayed with me all the way into my adulthood. Why? Because it felt familiar. It felt safe and it felt trusted. But when I finally left it, it was liberating. And that's the power of reflection, because it's questioning what we've been taught and questioning what we're exposed to and choosing what serves us best, even if it means stepping out of the status quo and forging a new path. So, what can you do? The reason I'm telling you all of this, because I want you, as a young person, to feel empowered to take things into your own hands. Step away from some of the beliefs that your friends, your family, and that social media, and even that random finance guru you're probably following on Insta, because they may be blinding you to a better way of investing. And so here's where to start. Educate yourself, right? Now, this is a double-edged sword. Seek out multiple perspectives. Most importantly, challenge the source, especially if it is coming from someone who hasn't achieved what you want. Challenge me. Challenge the people at Positive Real Estate. Post the questions that you want answered, and we'll get them answered with no fluff. And then there's leverage. So leverage wisely. Debt can be dangerous, but it's also powerful. So learn how to use it to build and not burden your future. And then start to think long term. So compound interest doesn't give you the thrill, for example, of a trade, but it's magic. So if you can play the long game, you'll always come out on top. And review your beliefs. What money stories are you holding on to that no longer serve you? Just because your parents believed it doesn't make it right. And then get strategic. Don't just hustle. I see so many young people hustling. They've got side gigs, second jobs, all while studying and doing all this stuff. But don't just hustle, okay? Plan. Wealth isn't built through vibes. It's built through action and alignment. And find your people. So whether it's a trusted advisor, a mentor, or a like-minded community, find the people who challenge you to grow. Because here's the truth. You don't have to listen to the people who never lived in your reality. And you don't have to follow advice that doesn't work in today's economy. And you definitely don't need to base your future on outdated rules. You can build something better, but it starts by choosing better role models, steering clear of flashy trends, and having the courage to think differently, even if it means disagreeing with the people that you love. It's not rebellion, it's just self-leadership. And if you're a young person and you found this useful, please reach out and book an appointment with me or one of my colleagues, and we can talk you through what you could be doing to start writing your own future. Thanks so much for joining us today, folks. This has been Property Investor Tales. My name is Emily, and until next time, happy investing.
Hey, thanks for listening to Property Investor Tales. Remember to subscribe so you get notified every time a new episode drops. As you can guess, I love hearing people's property investor tales. So if you'd like to share yours, then please get in touch with me via email at propertyinvestortales@positivementor.com.au. We would also love your feedback, and I would appreciate a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember, you can watch all of these podcasts over on YouTube at Positive Mentor or at positivementor.com.au. Until then, take care, happy investing, and bye for now.